Alright, so I'm going to start setting up my project here, and we'll get started on building the rig. So I have my project downloaded. I'll be using Portfolio 3 demo as my project for this rig. And so you always want to make sure your project's set, and you want to make sure you go into Maya and set your project. So you just go to File, Set Project, and mine will be in my downloads, which will be here, and Portfolio 3 demo. All right. So wherever you guys have yours stored, you just set your project there. Just make sure that when you have your project set, you don't have any spaces in your folder names, because you will be using Renderman later, and you don't want to have issues with your renders where you have to rename your project and fix all your textures and all that stuff. So make sure that you don't use a space in your folder name. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my scene. I'll grab the MA file. That's fine with me. Excuse me. All right, so I have my scene in here. One of the first things I'll do is I know I'm going to have an issue with my textures. So now I personally won't, but you guys will. So you want to open up your Hypershade, and we will go ahead and do a quick texture fix. So there are two Pixar shaders in here. There's a Pixar base and a Pixar detail. One is the chrome, one is the color texture. So you can just go ahead, if you don't have, I already have mine graphed, but if you don't have them graphed, you can go ahead and just select them both and just hit the little double graph arrow. That's your input-output connection, and that'll graph them out for you. All right. And what you want to fix is the file textures. So it's all of the gray ones here are your files. So there's an issue with Renderman where whenever you set up a scene and you save it out, it wants to store, Renderman wants to store the absolute path to where the textures are stored. My textures are stored out in my Dropbox. Even though my project is currently set to this other folder, it's still pointing to the old folder, and that's a Renderman thing. So what we want to do is basically on every file node, once you start your rig, you want to go ahead and go in and fix your textures. So you can do this anytime you want, even if you get to the point where you're actually doing the renders, you can go in and fix it in the rig and it'll fix it. I just found it's best just to fix it now, that way you don't have to worry about it later. So what I'll do is I'll just delete everything before source images. So I have the source images in a big long file name. Just delete everything before that, because that'll force it to use the source images of the project, which is where all the textures are stored anyway. All right, and just hit enter. All right, you just do this for each one. So just select each one as soon as it loads, and then just delete everything above that. All right, do the next one. So it loads, and then go ahead and delete it. All right, it's taking a little bit because my render is running up here every time I change file texture. So let's select this guy, and everything before source images. Delete it. Right here. Delete that. And finally, this. So get this all clean. Alright, so we're good to go. Alright, so you can just click through and just look. Just make sure it just says source images here, and you'll be fine. Alright, so they're all fine. I'm not going to sit and go through all these again. So I'll close this. I don't need to open this anymore. Alright. So now what I need to do is I need to go ahead and start building my rig for this object. All right, so I will go into my side view, because it's always best to draw your joints in the side view. All right, so you always want to kind of look, see what it is you're dealing with. All right, so we have our base, which is going to be mounted to the table. We have the other base, which is the base twist part. So I call it base twist. So I have this base, and you'll notice we have this little piece here that's not attached. It's its own piece. This is that chrome piece. There's a piece of chrome on the bottom, and then this is the painted part. So this is separate because it has a separate shader. So it's not a big deal for us because it'll just get parented to the joint just like this one does. So these two will both be parented to the same joint. They'll all move together. All right. As we move up, we've got our arm. So each one of these pieces is going to rotate right around here. You always want to kind of look and see where the rotation is going to happen. So it's going to be somewhere in the middle here, and it'll rotate. All right, we got these hoses in between. So these are going to have to flex, so we're going to have to deal with that. Then we move on up. We have the top piece here. This top piece is kind of interesting. It's not just like a straight joint here to a joint here. There is this piece here that's going to rotate, obviously, around right here. But we also have this motor, and we have this piece going in here. And what this does is it allows us to spin. All right. So we're going to have a joint that comes up to this point, and it's going to spin this way. It's going to point out this direction. All right. All right, and then it comes on out. We have a joint that's going to happen here for this piece, for the upper arm. And then we have this piece here, which is going to be where you can actually spin this piece. So we got this little motor thing here, and the little thing's going to spin right here. All right, and then we have our claws. Now, it may look like you'll be able to just draw a joint chain right across. However, if we go to our top view and we look at this, we'll be drawing on this plane. All right, so this is our XY plane. And so as we come across, you see the center of our rotation can happen, like these are the pieces where the arm rotates. And as we come out here and we hit this part here, so we have this part here where this spins, so this is centered down the axes. However, because of the way this thing is shaped, you'll notice that the upper arm is actually offset. All right, so this is where we're going to get into a broken hierarchy. We're going to split this. So the upper arm is going to be its own piece, and the bottom part is going to be this piece. So this first video will be just for the bottom piece. All right, we'll get our joints all set up and ready to go up to this point, and then we'll transition over to the next video, which will be this part. All right, so let's go ahead and go into our side view and kind of look at how are we going to draw these joints, which actually it's the front view because it's modeled sideways, so we're actually looking at it from the front. All right. And so basically what's going to happen is we're going to have a joint that starts at the bottom, and this will be the base. So it'll be the joint that holds the base down to the ground. All right? And each piece of this geometry is going to bind to one specific joint all the way up. All right? Now, you can have more joints than you have pieces of geometry. That's fine. Some joints are there just for guiding purposes, and I've got a couple of those that I'll be putting in. So we'll have a few joints in here that aren't actually used for anything other than to help guide other joints. All right, so I'm gonna have a joint here. I'm gonna have to have a joint here for this piece. I'll have a joint here for this rotation, for this arm. Then I'll have another joint here for rotating this top piece, joint for spinning this guy, and so on and so forth. You know, we already just kind of talked about that a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and start creating our joints. So the way you get to the joints is to go to your rigging menu. So just hit the drop down, go to rigging. Excuse me. And we will start drawing joints. So we'll always want this joint here because we're right on the origin and right flat on the ground. We want this joint to be snapped right to the origin dead center. The center of the world is currently the center of the base of this arm. So it makes it easy. I can just go ahead and go to the joints. So you go to skeleton, create joints. I've also made some shelf tools to automatically do some of this stuff. But we'll say create joints. And what this will do is this will flip us to the create joints tool. So we have the plus sign on the screen. And so we will go ahead and we'll create a joint here at the center. So the way you grid snap is you hold down X, and then whenever I click, it will create a joint right here at the center of the origin. So when I click, no matter where it is, it'll be at the center. Now your joint may be larger. I have my joint size set kind of small, so don't worry about like how big the joints are. They'll be different depending on your setup. So I have a lot of joints going on, so they'll be. I don't want them too large where they're overlapping each other. So I set mine kind of small. You can always change it later. It's not a big deal. All right, so I've created the first joint. And then the next joint, that will be the one that holds it to the ground. So now the next joint is the one I want for the rotation of this base. And so I'll put the joint at the point where I want the rotation to occur. And for the base, it's this little engine motor thing inside here. But I'm going to go ahead and just kind of keep it kind of right at the point where the rotation happens, which is right along here. All right. So this piece is the one that's spinning, even though the whole thing goes with it. I'm going to put that rotation right here. Now, I don't want to just click somewhere up here. I need this centered. And so because this is modeled dead center, straight up, what I can do is I can hold down the Shift key. And when I click for the next joint with the left mouse button, what that will do is that will allow me to create the joint chain straight up and down. and see how I can click and drag. It doesn't matter where the mouse goes. It's going up and down here. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this joint right here. Okay. And honestly, it doesn't matter. I could put the joint all the way up here if I wanted to. Technically, it doesn't matter. I like to put the joints where it makes logical sense to me, where the rotation's occurring. It's also where the control is going to go. So the control for the base rotation I want down here on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this joint right here and let go. All right. So now I have my second joint. So now your logical next thing that you would want to do is, the next thing that rotates on this whole thing is this guy. All right. Now, your gut reaction is going to be, okay, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to draw a joint right here. All right. Problem with that is, as I discussed in the other video, is when you are drawing joints for a joint chain, when I click and draw the next joint, what will happen is this joint will turn to point to the next joint in the chain. It'll automatically rotate. All right. I need this joint to stay flat right here. All right. And so what I'm going to do is to prevent this joint from turning, because if it turns, now this joint is pointed this way. Like the flat plane is going this direction. It's pointing up here. All right. And I don't want that. I need this joint to stay flat. So the way you do that is I'm going to put in what I call a holding joint. And what this is a joint that forces this joint to stay flat. And so to keep this flat, all I got to do is draw another joint straight up. So I'll hold down Shift and I will click up, and this will create a second joint up above. And honestly, it doesn't matter how far you go. I could put it like right here if I wanted to. But I'm going to go ahead and just bring it up here somewhere, just so I can have it out where I can see it and I know where it is. All right, and I'll let go. All right, so now that joint is created here. So now I have a joint chain that has a joint here, and a joint here. All right, so now I can go up here and click and create this joint right here. Yeah, if I click, you'll notice, I don't know how well you'll see it, you'll see this joint turn, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of get it right in the middle here. Bang. All right. And so if I turn off polygons for a second and zoom in, the way you do that is you hold down Alt and hit 2. That turns polygons on and off. So if I Alt 2, that brings polygons back. Alt 2 turns polygons off. It's a quick way of getting the mesh out of the way whenever you're drawing joints and stuff, so you can kind of see what's going on. And so if I zoom in, what you'll notice is, see this little plus sign in the joint, like what I showed you in the other video? Notice how this joint stays flat. And as soon as I come up to this joint, see how this joint is sideways? That's what would have happened here if I just drawn the joint to the next spot. And so suddenly now this joint wouldn't be flat, it would be like this. And so now I have no way of like rotating this joint on a flat plane because it's sideways. So that was why I did what I did. All right, and I'm still in draw mode. All right, so let me just go back to having the polygons on, and let me finish out this chain. So I have this guy kind of in the center. I'm a little off, but that's all right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go up here, and I'm going to find the center of this guy. So it'll be right around here. I'm going to create a joint. Boom. All right, so that'll be a rotation this way. And then I need to get a joint up here on the center of this guy. So now this one, you might be thinking, oh, well, you need to draw a joint up here for a holding joint and come in this way. No, because of the fact that when I draw the next joint, the joint before it's going to turn to point, it doesn't really matter where the joint's oriented when I click here. It's not going to matter at all. I just need to find the center. So the center, this one's a little tougher to see, but you got to kind of just eyeball it, and the center is somewhere right in this area right here. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop a joint right here and click. All right, now you're going to notice this joint isn't oriented correctly. So the way I'm going to get this joint oriented in the right direction is I'm going to create one more joint out here. Now, this is the point where this section jumps up to the side. And so I don't want to keep drawing joints all the way out because the rest of these joints won't be in the right spot. But what I do want to do is I want to draw a joint that will force this joint to be flat on this plane. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to eyeball a line straight out from where this joint's at. So I'll just kind of look out here somewhere. And it doesn't matter how far you go, but the farther you go, the better. Now usually I try to go kind of in the middle here. And what I'll do is I will just click right here. And notice how this joint flips. And if I turn polygons off, see how that joint is now oriented this way? If I turn the polygons back on, see I got it like this. And I turn it back on, see how I'm following that line? So now my joint is oriented with this this piece here. All right, and so now, at this point, I'm done with the base part. So I can go ahead and just hit enter. All right, just hit return. And what that does is that completes the joint chain. And so now whenever I peel back, you can see I have a joint chain that runs from the base up to the twist, and then across, up here to this point, and over and across. All right. Now it looks a little weird. It looks like, oh, it's off center, but not really, because of the fact that this has this little hook up here that goes up. The center of this doesn't match the center of this. The center is actually down here somewhere. If I were to draw a line all the way around, you could see it goes down the center. So it's running down this little piece here. All right, so with that done, we do want to make sure we keep naming our stuff. We don't want to go through and create all these joints and then forget what everything is. So we want to go ahead and start naming this stuff. So I'm going to, if you hit shift and click the little plus sign, that'll expand out the entire joint chain. All right, and so I want to go through and name all these. So the first one is the base, and so this will be the arm base. All right, then we'll go up to the next one, next joint up, which is right here. This is going to be the twist. This is where the base is going to twist. So I will call this arm base. Oops, if I can type, twist. All right, this next piece is a holding joint. So it doesn't technically matter, but you want to follow the same convention. So I'll call it arm base. I'll call it holding. You know, you can come up with some name to just kind of so you know it's not meant to be used for anything. All right, and so the next one is the arm lower. So this is the lower rotate. Next one up will be up here, and this will be the arm mid. All right, arm underscore mid. You always want to preface things with what is it, which is the arm. When you get into characters and stuff where you have left and right arm, left and right leg, you'll actually preface it with the side. So you have LT underscore arm, RT underscore arm, depending on if it's left or right. So there'll be other prefixes used. Because this is all just one arm, I don't need to do that. So I'm just prefacing everything with arm. So when I look at it, I know it's the arm joints. I know it's joints because they're joints, okay? And then you do an underscore, and then you put what's it for. So I have the base, I have the base twist, I have the arm lower rotation, I have the arm mid rotation. Now I'm going to have this twist, and so the way I'll name that is I will call this arm, and it's mid, so it'll be a mid and then twist, so that I know it's the midpoint of the twist. Some people will come in and call this elbow. You know, the others, there's different kind. I wouldn't really consider this an elbow. This is really just an arm with different sections in it. So just an arm, mid, twist, and then anytime you come to the last joint in a chain, you always want to end it with end. So we will call this arm, mid, end. Oh, I need an underscore there. All right. That way I know it's an end joint. End joints are kind of special. Sometimes, a lot of times you don't use the end joints. Sometimes you do. It just kind of depends on if you have a use for it. But usually the last joint in the chain is meant to be what I used it for here, where I keep that joint oriented a certain way because this joint needs to rotate. Also, end joints, they don't know where to point, so end joints are always oriented to the world. So when you look at, if I zoom in and look, you'll notice how the last joint, it doesn't know where to point, so it's oriented to world space. So it's up, down, left, right. It's not oriented with anything. So that's another reason why you tend not to use end joints for controls and stuff, because they don't know where to point exactly. All right. And so at this point, we now have our joints all in a chain. And this would be a good spot to go ahead and create your joints group, because ultimately you're going to have a hierarchy. You're going to have hierarchy of geo, hierarchy of joints, hierarchy of controls. So you can go ahead and just grab this arm base and control G and group it. All right, and we'll just call this joints. All right, so let's call it joints. All right, the geo, is already named, pre-named for you, so all the pieces and everything are already labeled and everything in there for you. You can go ahead and just grab this group and call it Geo. All right, this will be the prep work for creating the overall hierarchy. Okay, and so at this point, you should have your base joints in. Select those, should be the base, and then you have the Geo. All right, so next video, we will go ahead and we will create the upper arm portion. All right.